Jocelyn, good to see you. How's it going?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Having a lovely summer. How about you?
Yeah, good, thanks. So I guess I should start by saying that I saw you talk at the AMA probably about a month ago now, in Brighton, the place we now know we both live, which is great. Um, and I was really looking forward to that talk, and I had no idea what to expect. And to be honest, it wasn't you. I don't know what I had in my mind, but I loved how, you were just so your approach was just you made me feel at ease about the topic of AI straight away. And you had almost a light-hearted approach, I would say, to AI. It was kind of like, you know, you need to know about this, guys. Don't panic. Here's some things you can do, and then maybe panic a little bit towards some of the stuff. So I kind of left, and I was chatting to some of the people I was sat next to, um, and everyone was actually saying how much they enjoyed the talk. And I remember them just thinking, you know, yeah, no, I was really worried about AI, and now I'm not so worried. And interesting, some people were like, no, I am still feeling quite worried. And it was just, I've never heard such a like varied response to a talk before. And my feelings coming out of the talk, I didn't really know where to place them either. So, but I found it really interesting. What were you trying to? How did you want people to feel coming away from that talk at the Arts Marketing Association?
Yeah, and thank you. It's really kind of you to say. Um, Honestly, I don't think about how I want people to feel because I think there would be an element of kind of manipulation in that. Like if I wanted people to leave my talk and be like, "Yeah, AI is great. I'm really into it." I feel like I would have been more of a salesperson than hopefully an
Yeah,
educator, which is what I kind of aspire to lean towards.
yeah.
But I think what I do want to encourage is experimentation with the tech and actually trying it yourself instead of just reading articles and getting quite anxious. Even if you hate I think it can be really useful to understand it more because that might allow you to argue against it as much as it allows you to implement it in some situations.
Mm.
So I think direct experimentation is a great way to get through anxiety and fear and start learning. And I think we're all better off if we learn whatever happens with AI.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I've got some questions that basically the questions were running around in my head ever since we had the talk. They feel like we really skimmed the surface. And to be honest, we probably only will today, but we'll see how we get on. So to start with, I'm going to put you on the spot a bit. I'm going to look for some yes or no answers to this first five questions. Um, so I'm just going to kick off into this.
Go for it. I reserve the right to follow up, but yes.
Okay. Should we be learning about AI right now?
Yeah,
Will AI significantly change how we work in the arts and culture sector?
I expect so.
Is AI more of an opportunity than a threat to the culture sector?
That depends what you mean by threat, and it also depends what you mean by the culture sector. So I'm going to have to hold off on that one.
Are our jobs safe from AI in the short term?
Some jobs are already being affected by AI. Some freelancers in particular are already losing work to generative AI. You know, you've voiceover artists and sound designers in particular have already been affected by it, and we're already seeing lots of AI work pop up on Etsy. Even craft stores have AI artwork popping up. So I don't think I can say in good conscience that no one's losing work at this point.
Mm. And will AI ever fully replace human creativity?
No, I think creativity is a fundamental attribute of consciousness for humans. I don't think it's possible for it ever to not be here.
Nice, thank you. Um, Jocelyn, can you tell us briefly about yourself? What do you do and why are you so interested in AI?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jocelyn Burnham. I operate from a website called aiforculture.com, and I work with a wide range of organizations across sort of arts, culture, heritage, and media. And we look at emerging AI technologies, and I run sessions where we sort of explore those and we build up our literacy about the tech. And then increasingly, I also do sort of talks at conferences and panels around those topics too. Um, importantly, I try to approach the topic with as much neutrality as I can. So I'm not the kind of person who goes around saying, you can supercharge your work with AI in these 5 quick steps, and nothing against that if you find it efficient. But that's not my vibe at all. So instead, I try and focus a lot more on how do we get started and what are some conversations that could be really useful and productive for us to start having. And then how do we continue learning, and how do we sort of do that in a critical framework that makes sense for us, both in our organizations, but our values and our ethics and everything else. So it's a little bit more around developing an overall awareness and application of AI rather than a sales pitch. And I think for me personally, I find AI absolutely fascinating. I find that it expands the number of ways that I can engage with the collective knowledge of our species. It allows me to understand academic articles that I wouldn't have normally been able to read even the first few lines. Suddenly it can translate it into words that I understand. Or I can have a conversation about my blood test results with an AI, and then it gives me questions that I can then actually go and ask my doctor, and it turns into a conversation that benefits my health. Or I can make computer games with it. So for me, it's unlocked a lot of kind of homeschooler, like I say, I'm a homeschooler-like enjoyment from knowledge. But that's not to say that my overall view is AI is inherently positive. I really do try and underline that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. It feels like AI just sort of came out of nowhere. What do you think people are most worried about in the arts and culture space when it comes to AI?
I mean, it's worth remembering that we've had AI with us a long time. I mean, if you've ever edited a Word document because you've had a green squiggly line under some of the text, you've produced AI written content, if you know what I mean. So it's just a case of where we sort of draw boundaries. But there have been accelerations in the last few years. It sort of goes back to, it's a bit technical, but there was a breakthrough that Google did in about 2017 with something called a transformer architecture. And all it meant is that we could process language in a way which we hadn't really done before, which made it much more efficient and much more sort of high quality data that we were getting, that we could use with our systems. So that is an actual sort of moment that really did change the game a little bit. And what we're seeing now is the maturity of technology. Well, not even the maturity, but really the beginning of innovations from those kind of breakthroughs that are sort of happening around us now. But when we talk about arts and culture in particular with this stuff, I think it's the fear of the unknown, first of all. It's the anxiety around this big thing, which we suspect is going to be really important, but we don't really know how to engage with it. And we don't really know if it's going to be a net positive or a net negative for us and our work and our institutions. So I think there's a lot of anxiety around that, whether it will water down culture, whether it will steal horrifically, with copyright and rip off artists, which a lot of people are already seeing and arguing that it does. And then also things like the environmental impact as well is a conversation that happens a lot around this. So there are lots of different concerns, but I would say right now it's anxiety, copyright, and probably environmental concerns.
And do you hear and talk about the kind of learning around this AI that's kind of being pressed upon us, and how does the arts and culture sector feel about that? It's from our point of view, we see a lot of establishments within the sector still kind of getting to grips with their websites and their social media. Do you feel like it's a sector that may be more anxious about that than others, perhaps?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? The first bit cut out.
Just the learning curve within the sector. How do you feel like they may feel about that in a sector which we might say perhaps has taken longer to transform to other elements of digital?
Yeah. I think that we've got a lot to learn from how the culture sector responded to, even the internet. And I think there are lessons that we can take from it too, if we're brave and if we sort of are okay being uncomfortable with these things. I mean, this is my own kind of perspective of it, but in the same way that I think what really fuels the internet isn't, what can we do with it for work? It's more about what culture we're accessing with it. It's the words that we're reading. It's the videos we're watching on YouTube. It's it is culture is what is so much a part of the DNA of the internet. And I would be really surprised if the same isn't also true for AI. But what I would love to see is the culture sector being quite brave about this, and instead of sort of waiting around for someone in California to create a tool and tell us how to use it, I would much rather see the culture sector being more literate about this and creating their own innovations and their own sort of processes and their own language a little bit around this. So it's more of an active role in that process, because we have the capability to do it. We have smart, creative people. We have difficult conversations that happen in our buildings. We're the right people to be innovating in this space. We don't need somebody else to tell us how to do it. But I think from my perspective, it's a lot more about empowerment. And this isn't like Google Analytics. There's not a best way to use it. We're allowed to shape this conversation. And I think that we're really well placed to shape this conversation too.
That's a really good answer. So in what ways do you feel AI may be necessary for artistic innovation and collaboration, or useful?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely not necessary. I mean, I don't think it's even necessary to use electricity for, artistic innovation. It's a tool that's there if you want to explore with it. That said, I think people are doing very interesting things with it. And I think that it does unlock a lot of potentials for certain types of people who enjoy making certain types of work right now. But honestly, I have no idea where it's going to go. And I have no idea the ways that we might discover that it applies to arts and culture. I mean, an example that I draw is, if I can have an AI which makes it a little bit more likely that I get out of bed if I'm feeling tired and I don't want to create that day, well, that's an AI that served me. That's an AI which has made more arts and culture in the world just because it's got me working, just because I've been able to talk through my anxieties and start being productive in my own work. So I think there's a blurry line there between where the AI helps us. If it helps us just get started, then that's a good thing as well.
I really like that idea. And, and again, with individual creativity, if it helps us understand when we're most creative, and you probably know that feeling of procrastination where you just feel today's just not going to happen. I don't know what else I'm going to do. It's not going to be that.
Yeah, all the time. And I think that we often think past that. We're ashamed of our squishy emotional selves. And so much of arts and culture comes from, the squishy emotional self. And I think it's absolutely fair to say, if I'm stressed and I can talk through a problem, perhaps with an AI, and it means that I can then go and do work, that's a valid use in my perspective of how someone could use it. So, yeah, that kind of way.
Okay. How will AI lead to more interactivity, personalized curation, and accessibility for arts and culture? There's quite a lot in that, so feel free to unpack it or pick out the bits you want to answer.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, it's a bit of a crystal ball in some ways, because I'm aware that so much of this tech is changing, and I'm always skeptical of anyone who can say with any ounce of authority what's going to happen, because they can't, and I hope we should be honest about that. It's part of the fun, really. But with that said, I would be surprised if we didn't see accessibility in particular as one of the places where this first starts to really make a noticeable change. And I don't just mean that necessarily in the sort of the ways that we already think about accessibility, although it will certainly help, I imagine, with things like describing environments in audio and making work more accessible for people with different needs. I absolutely am sure that will be a use case too. But I think accessible, I kind of mean it in what I was talking about with the being able to understand academic papers that I couldn't before. I think it could be a really useful way to help people engage with cultural subjects, which maybe they before felt a bit intimidated by, or they didn't feel that they had an entry point into it. I think that it can be quite democratic in that sense. And I think something which we're aware of in the arts and culture sector is there can really be a difference between, if you were brought up with people, taking you to see Shakespeare or kind of explaining what it was and kind of being an entry point into that, versus if you didn't. And I think that we know that. And I think that one thing I like about AI is it can be a bit of a bridge to give people that entry point, that experience into work, which they might not otherwise engage with. And also kind of give them a safe space to ask whatever questions they want, because people there was something that we said a few times. I used to work at Sadler's Wells, and there was a joke that we had at one point, which was, people really only fear two things. They fear death and they fear contemporary dance, because some of this stuff is so intimidating that you don't know where to begin. Anyway, that's a long answer, but I think it's just sort of bringing people into those conversations, and I think that that's something I'm really excited to see.
Thank you. Really interesting. How might AI change the economics of the arts and culture sector, and what new business models emerging could benefit the industry, if you're aware of any? And I know that this is, again, a lot of these are kind of a bit crystal ball, but I feel like you're the best person to ask at the moment. So.
Well, then I will say that I absolutely don't know. Like, this is one of those things I can't even hazard a guess about it because the tech is changing so quickly. Business models, I don't know. I would be very surprised if we don't get groups of people who weren't telling stories before who find new ways to now, whether that's people creating graphic novels with, AI art generators and their own stories, or creating short films with AI tech. So I imagine you're going to get a lot more people who've never felt like they're creative people who are now kind of doing that. And I have no idea how that will affect the business or the finances of the creative sector. I think it's something that we're all going to see as it happens.
I guess just thinking based on what you said, effectively anyone who knows how to use AI well could potentially create an AI generated art exhibition without knowing too much about art.
Yeah, theoretically. It depends on who's doing it and what tools they're using, and these tools are only getting easier and easier to use.
Yeah.
So I think really the question's out now about how people are going to use it, because right now less than 1% of 1% of the human population are really using these tools actively. And as that number begins to increase, we're going to see an amazing amount of different perspectives and creativity enter that. So it's it's kind of anything to play for, I think.
I mean, you talked about some of the benefits already of AI. How will the sector balance the benefits with the ethical concerns it raises, like you touched on, some of the issues around copyright, authorship, potential for even job displacement? I guess the answer is you probably don't know, but what are your thoughts and feelings on that?
Yeah, sure. I think before we can make good decisions, we need to have good conversations and informed conversations. And I think before we can have informed conversations, we need to have literacy about this. So I think one has to follow the other. And I think we can't know at this point what a good ethical response to some of this stuff is until we have those big conversations with lots of different people inputting. And that won't be worth having until there's good literacy across the board about at least some of the core concepts of AI. So I don't know what the future holds or what that would look like, but I do know that digital literacy is probably the only thing that I feel certain of is a net positive for the sector. And where it goes after that is anyone's guess, but I would feel a lot more comfortable knowing that a lot of different people are fed into that process rather than just a couple of people who know what the tech is and know how to use it.
Are those conversations happening now that you speak of? And who's sort of driving them internally? And what's the kind of feel about opening up and having those conversations, which I guess involves you a lot of the time?
I think different organizations are doing different things at this point. So we have some that are doing more executive level briefings on AI and then are doing sort of big staff conversations too. We're seeing different organizations do AI policies. That's sort of a first step. Some places are doing AI working groups where they get representatives from different parts of the organization to kind of meet regularly and discuss things and look at training. So it's quite different in different places. The Arts Marketing Association is doing some good work on this as well, where they're kind of doing a large group of people from across the sector who are feeding into a process about what could an AI policy look like that could be kind of adopted and changed by different organizations. So I think right now it's still super early. I think that it's getting to the point of breaking through the first barrier of anxiety and doing initial training, which obviously I enjoy doing with people. And I think beyond that, it's sort of encouraging a little bit of autonomy. You know, there are some organizations that are encouraging their staff to try AI tools and are giving them data that they're happy for them to upload and are kind of empowering them about it. But equally, there are organizations where people are still scared to admit that they've even tried ChatGPT because they're worried they're going to get told off. So it's a lot of contrast right now. I don't think that it's one size is what we're all doing, but I really hope that people are at least starting to talk about it and giving staff a space where they can admit that they're trying it because they are. And it feels a bit like kind of having our head in the sand if we don't at least acknowledge that.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about AI generated content. How do you think that might affect the value of human created art? And do you think people will still value human made art in the same way?
So an analogy which I hear quite a lot, so it's not mine, is one about, you know, once we created an AI that could outperform any human at playing chess, we still found it fun to play chess. Like, we didn't stop doing it. It doesn't matter that someone could do it technically better than us. That's still a human thing to enjoy. And again, you know, we're already producing, in a way, AI content. Like, if you're a novelist and you're writing with spell check and all this kind of stuff, with my Word documents, it's a sea of red lines. I'm terrible at spelling. So I've been using AI content in that way too. But I think more broadly, you know, humans seek meaning and we seek stories, and we don't really know if there's such a thing as too many stories for us to absorb. We care about other humans. You know, we have a fundamental kind of bias to care about other humans more than anything else in the world. You know, we could be making stories, and we do sometimes, about animals talking or robots talking, but all the stories we pretty much make, you know, 95% or more of them, are about humans. You know, we like humans. We want to see what happens when humans talk to each other. I could read about an incredible breakthrough happening in science and be really excited about it one moment. But then the other moment, I'm downstairs and one of my housemates is telling me about a date they went on, and that story is suddenly just as captivating, and I'm just as into it.
Yeah, sure.
So I think it's a really lovely feature of our brains that we care about other human stories, and I don't think that we'll ever stop having that. So I think even if there's a lot of AI stuff out there, we're still going to seek human stories. I don't think that will change.
Yeah, no, I'm just listening to what you said, and I think it ties back to that idea of accessibility, especially with, you know, enhancing, you know, historic, you know, visual, audio, whatever. If you're getting a new generation to watch it, wherefore they may not have before, you're kind of making that topic more accessible, right, to a new group of people, because it's meeting them on their level, right?
I mean, that's the argument. But there are smarter people than me working in heritage and culture who will be horrified at that idea as well. So I think it's, again, one of those ones that I want more people to enter this conversation. And I want the things that I haven't considered that could be, you know, real criticisms of that too. But for me personally, I imagine it's inevitable that we will see it hit that sector in some way. I just don't know what that looks like.
Maybe someone listening or watching this will have some stronger views on it. Either way, that might be interesting to talk to about. So hopefully that'll happen, and they can contact me. Okay, so what steps should be taken to ensure that AI tools and algorithms reflect the diversity of human culture and do not perpetuate existing inequality?
I honestly think that question is probably one of the most important that our species will have to answer in the next generation, in this generation.
No pressure.
No pressure. You know, we know that they have tremendous bias right now, these tools. We talked about censorship, but the most awful biases are probably going to be the ones that are so niche and so specific that they won't initially get enough attention to be resolved. You know, we might get pressure groups that pick up on certain things, but there will be smaller groups or individual medical conditions or people being described from a region of the world, and they will have biases that won't be picked up. So we're not really getting fair representation in that kind of way. Again, it gets a bit crystal ball-y. I imagine that I think open source models are probably going to play a big role here, where we see lots of smaller specialized models for different countries and communities and workforces. And, I think there's a conception that it's going to be the same AI everywhere. The AI is AI, and it will be one master corporation that controls it, and it's all going to be identical. And I personally don't think that's going to be the case, but I don't know. But what I think is more likely is that there will be lots of tailored AIs, lots of open source models that people have kind of built for their purposes, for their communities, that they feel confident reflect their values and aren't biased towards those values in a negative way. So yeah, it's a bit technical, but I imagine it's more of a modular system where you might have a couple of corporations that create the most intelligent models, but then there's a step where we have our own open source models that interact with those and actually give us the results that we feel most comfortable with. I imagine that's something could happen, but I really don't know. There's an abundance of theories about this issue. But I do think that humans are pretty good at solving problems, and we know this is a big one. And again, I'm hopeful that more people get into this conversation and we do start to find some interesting kind of ways to approach that.
Yeah, that idea around sort of objectivity with AI is huge, because it depends on the objectivity of whoever's programming it, right?
Yeah.
Kind of. So yeah, that's I guess that's going to be just a topic that we'll have to keep grappling with as time goes by. What's the most interesting use of AI you've seen so far within the cultural sector?
Oh, see, this is really a difficult one because I'm often not permitted to speak about things that I see that people are doing.
Right.
But I did have a really good conversation earlier this week with a musician called Harry Yeff, who makes music under the name Reaps 100. He's like a rapper and works with voice and sound. And he's really interesting. He's doing lots of work with AI. He directed the world's first AI ballet with Leipzig Opera House, I think it was, a few years ago. And they used AI throughout that process for the choreography, for the costumes, for the storyline. I'll need to check the details, but it's one that's worth exploring as a really interesting kind of case study of AI being used artistically. Within that, though, there's lots going on behind the scenes. And I think that we should, always be aware that AI being used doesn't just mean it being used in the places that audiences are most likely to see it, but it's being used a lot behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So I know that people are working, sounds a bit boring, but people are doing really interesting things with their data right now, where maybe they're finding, big data reports or kind of things they've commissioned that are just sitting on a file somewhere. And they're using AIs to draw out interesting stories in that data, to find insights that no human would have otherwise found, and then to maybe write blog posts that sort of explore that a bit. So it's making more of the resources that they have is interesting too. But yeah, people are using it for different things, people are making games with it. But right now it seems like it's very much in an internal experimentation phase with the occasional one-off high-profile kind of artistic work of it.
Right. Yeah, if you come across the details of the AI ballet collaboration, please send me the link. You might include it alongside this book. How can normal people in the sector, embrace AI? Where should they start?
That's a really good question. First of all, I'm probably not a normal person, actually. I was going to make a joke about how I am, but I'm probably not. I don't think a normal person exists. I think everyone is unique and weird.
Actually, that part of it.
No, but it's a fair one because I think it feels like AI belongs to people who are techie right now, and it's a bit of a, how, and that's really what I try and push in my own sessions is that this belongs to you as much as anyone else. This is not something which someone in California makes and they give to you on a silver platter and you have to be grateful. That's not what this is. This is something we all have the ability to feed into and to control. Starts a bit with literacy, and I think literacy can start with enjoyment, actually. So a big thing that I talk about in my work is embracing playfulness with AIs. So I mentioned before that I was homeschooled. And when I was brought up, I was actually unschooled. And the idea of unschooling is that you don't have a curriculum at all for the young person. You just encourage them to learn about whatever they find interesting at the time, even if that changes every day. With the idea being that because they're excited about it, they're going to be learning a lot faster. And eventually they're going to be sort of reaching mathematics or English or whatever because they've advanced in whatever it is that they already enjoy learning about. So I kind of apply that process to my own work with AI and the workshops that I do, where I really encourage people just to follow what they find interesting. Don't worry about what makes you more efficient or what saves time or what you should know. Try and put all that out of your head and just follow what you find interesting. Because by doing that, you're going to naturally become more responsive to learning about it. You're going to want to talk about it more. You're going to be learning concepts which are going to be applicable across AI anyway. And you'll be kind of getting involved perhaps in communities and watching videos and just soaking more stuff up. So I think lean towards what you find interesting. Put the idea of, oh my God, I have to learn about this or I'm going to not keep up and all that stress. You know, if you can, like, just try to find something that you enjoy and see where that takes you. Because I think you'll get further with that personally. But everyone's different.
Thank you. How long will it be before AI blows our minds? And what are the biggest opportunities and challenges on the horizon?
Oh, I mean, my mind is blown all the time by AI. You know, it really is. I think AI music right now, on Udio or Suno, is absolutely blowing my mind. And I feel like not that many people in the sector have realized how good AI music has got. And I think as they do, they're going to start having those mind-blowing moments too. I mentioned earlier that, you know, I've been using AI to help me have discussions with my doctor. That's a mind-blowing moment to me. Like, for the first time, I'm able to have the data my doctor looks at, and I'm able to discuss it at length with an intelligence that allows me to then have agency in a way that I never had before. That's a mind-blowing moment to me too. So I think there are lots of ways that minds are being blown right now. Animation, I imagine, is going to be one that we'll start seeing as video generators improve. They're not there yet, but they are improving quite quickly. And people making sort of their own animated films and stories. And at first, I suspect it will just be a novelty until somebody makes a good one that gets shared and goes viral. And then suddenly we're going to be convinced that this stuff can be used in storytelling in a big way. But again, I would really encourage the culture sector to lead this conversation instead of following it, instead of trying to keep up. You know, I really think that we have so many smart and creative people in this sector who like difficult problems, who like difficult conversations. And I really hope that we can empower them to use this in whatever way feels right to them and to have the agency to make mistakes and kind of challenge each other and build things. And be proud of the fact that the culture sector has that. And we don't need somebody to tell us how to do our jobs. We're here to do them. And if we do that in a collaborative way, I think something really cool is going to come out of it. So I really hope that the sector kind of finds the energy in that and rises to the challenge with AI. And from what I'm seeing, I think they will. And that's really exciting to be part of.
Yeah. I think we talked about the AI being used within their context of in collaboration with ballet. And you just talked about music. And I wonder if we think about like classical music and orchestras, have you heard or do you know of AI that can kind of produce classical music at the moment? I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. Udio is fantastic at classical music. That's udio.com. You can try it free a certain, like 12 times a day or something. Suno is also very good. For background music, especially on videos and things like that, it's incredibly good. You can put in exactly the tone you want, the style, the composer, I think, as well, to do something in that style. Yeah, music's one which I think people hasn't really saturated through yet, but I think as people start seeing what can be done, they're going to be. When I do my workshops, I show off a lot of this stuff, obviously, and the one recently that's been really stopping people on their tracks has been music.
Mm.
Yeah.
And is it kind of royalty free at the moment? How's it? What's the licensing?
Yeah, I mean, if you pay for the subscription, which is something like £12 a month, it tells you that it's royalty free, and you can use it commercially. The bigger, what a lot of people listening to this will instantly be saying, yes, but it's not their decision that it's royalty free because they've been trained on copyright music, so they can say it's copyright free, but we don't know that it is. Mm-hmm. But it seems to be pragmatically it is copyright free because no one's going to get at this point in any trouble for using it. But there is a wider discussion about the ethics of where that training data came from and if it was ripping off people in certain ways, as some people would say. So it's, open question.
Maybe if I can find an example, I'll include it on my report.
Yeah, I can send you some to have a play out for the podcast.
That'd be great. Jocelyn, thanks for chatting to me today. You're obviously really excited by this topic, and it's great to see, your enthusiasm for it and the way in which you're looking to encourage these conversations. Like you said, I think that really is the first step. It's encouraging, brands within the sector to start talking about it, to be open about it, talk about their anxieties and their fears and their hopes for AI. And I'm really glad that we've kind of got someone like you that's, openly talking about it and making it feel like we can too, and it's not something, we should worry or stress about too much.
That's really kind of you to say. I love doing this, and I say often that I don't, I see myself as employed by the sector as a whole, rather than any individual client. So I'm always so happy if anyone emails me with a question or just wants a conversation or wants to catch up one-on-one about it. Because I think we're better off when we're sharing this stuff and we're not in competition with each other. So I feel very privileged to get to do what I do, and I would love to keep doing it. And until then, I just hope that people can, find a way to engage with it that feels right for them, and also be okay with the fact that there aren't easy answers at this point, and it's going to take some experimentation and maybe a bit of bravery to figure out what we want to do. But thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation.
All right, thanks, Jocelyn. And I'll catch up with you soon.